Welcome! This time, the protagonist of the story we want to present to you is a year, and perhaps the fact that, as you can see, we are in Genoa can give you a clue. It is a year that has gone down in history for an epoch-making discovery that changed the world. But it is a year in which many other very important things happened, both for good and, as you will see, also for bad. And it is a year that has conventionally become the dividing line between the Middle Ages and the modern age. In short, you got it. The year we want to tell you about is 1492. As we have done in previous years, we will also recount this year through the testimonies of those who were there, famous figures and ordinary people. And then we also allowed ourselves a little game, starting from the fact that in 1492, it had already been 40 years since Gutenberg had created another one of those inventions that changed the world, the printing press. They were printing books and pamphlets everywhere. And then we said to ourselves, what would it have been like if things had progressed a little further even at that time? If newspapers had already existed, what would their front pages have looked like? And we naturally start from January 1st, because we are on the eve of one of those great events that made 1492 a decisive year. In Spain, the last stronghold still in the hands of the Moors surrenders to the Christians, and Granada, which still preserves many traces of the centuries during which it was an Arab and Muslim city, like the Alhambra.
The Alhambra, a marvelous architectural work, and to think that this very wonder will give its name to the Edict of the Catholic Monarchs, which for all of us represented the beginning of disaster.
He is Abraham Zacuto, the first of our witnesses, a scholar, a historian, an astronomer. He wrote a history of the Jews and published a perpetual almanac with tables depicting the position of the sun and the moon on all days of the year. Understand, a very precious tool for navigators, and we will obviously talk quite a bit about navigators. Abraham Zacuto is naturally Jewish. He has also studied the Torah and the Kabbalah, but he has powerful friends in the Church of Spain. His treatise was written at the request of the Bishop of Salamanca, which is the seat of the oldest university in Spain. It was in Salamanca that one day a Genoese sailor came to visit him, who according to some was born nearby.
Christopher Columbus. How could I not? I remember him very well. When the court came to Salamanca, he was there too. He came to visit me. He was very interested in my books. He was someone who understood the sea well. However, during those days, he was very worried. He had recently presented his project, and a committee of experts was examining it. He couldn't sleep at night because he was waiting for the verdict. He was also a bit crazy, you know, one of those crazy people who always talk about the same thing and can't think of anything else. But then things went well for him. He was a determined type.
Determined? Well, I would use another term as well. As you say today, stalker. And so Columbus was stalking, big time. He had been following us for years, everywhere.
Yes, indeed, it was a bit like that. Wherever the court moved, he was behind. And he wrote to them. And not only that, it made us write for nobles, religious figures, and bankers, It was truly exhausting.
But I think there was also in Granada, right?
To Granada, I don't remember, but it is indeed more than likely.
I present to you the Catholic monarchs Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, two sovereigns for Spain, because until their marriage, a united Spain did not even exist. There were the Kingdom of Castile and the Kingdom of Aragon, but now there is a couple that governs both, and for the conquest of Granada. The Pope will authorize them to be called the Catholic monarchs. Because the first major event of 1492 is precisely this. After centuries, a foundational event in the history of Spain concludes: the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula by Christians, after it had been conquered by the Arabs, the Moors, as they call them. The Sultan of Granada, who is the last surviving Muslim enclave, and the Sultan, Abu Abdallah, whom the Spaniards distort into Boabdil, signed the surrender as early as November. He requested a period of truce and promised that on January 2nd he would deliver the keys of the city. In the Spanish camp, preparations for the ceremony are being completed, and some wonder whether the Sultan will truly respect the agreements or if fighting will be necessary. And perhaps someone hopes for it, because a nice plundering of the conquered city wouldn't be out of place.
We were ready for the fight, for the battle to the last blood, and then we went.
And indeed, Boabdil has kept the agreement. My beloved consort, who is present here, and I led a sumptuous procession that circled around the city and stopped on a hill overlooking the Alhambra.
And my knights were ready to charge to conquer the city and lay it to waste.
Instead, they had to give up the fun. The Sultan arrived on horseback and offered us the keys to the city. Then he became emotional, and his mother, who was a little further back, shouted, "Do not cry like a woman for what you could not defend like a man."
Oh yes, now I remember a pathetic scene that well represents an unconditional surrender.
Well, not so unconditional. We promised to respect the mosques and the laws of Muslims. Well, in politics, situations change. It's not like promises can be kept forever, right?
They promised Bob Dylan everything. They even gifted him a beautiful property in the mountains in the Sierra Nevada, with all the guarantees to continue living according to his faith as a good Muslim, he and his subjects. Almost immediately, Bob Dylan understood what was really going on and preferred to escape to Morocco, and like him, many others did too. Those who remained pretended to celebrate. Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon were triumphantly welcomed in Granada. After all, if nothing else, the war was over. However, many still had doubts, and not just among the Muslims.
We Jews of Spain did not know what to think. Until yesterday, we envied our people who lived in Granada. They were not forced to wear the yellow badge on their clothing, to live in ghettos, or to listen to the sermons of the friars who wanted to convert us by force. We were sorry that now all of this would also fall upon them. However, we hoped that with the end of the war against the Moors, after many centuries, Spain would become a place of peace, and that Christians would stop being afraid of us.
The Reconquista is not over. There is still an enemy among us. The perfidious Jews devour the wealth of Christians with usury. They mock us and call us idolaters. They practice the abominable circumcision. They are trying, by all means, to overturn our holy Catholic faith. They remained in the shadows to corrupt the faithful Christians and lead them away from the true religion. I am a leper that will rot Spain if their majesties do not act wisely.
This old Dominican friar, and truly old at 72 years, which is quite a lot for that time, has a name that still makes an impression today. His name is Brother Thomas of Torquemada, the Grand Inquisitor. The Inquisition exists in all Catholic countries to hunt down heretics and witches. But in Spain, the Inquisition has something special, because in Spain, the Grand Inquisitor, by papal concession, is appointed directly by the sovereigns. And this makes a big difference because, you see, in other Catholic countries, even though the government is theoretically supposed to cooperate with the Inquisition, no one likes to have a court in the country that does not follow your laws, and that obeys the Pope in Rome. Therefore, in all countries, the inquisitors always have issues with the government. In Spain, however, everything runs smoothly like oil. And Torquemada has been the inquisitor of all the kingdoms of Spain for 10 years. And he has employed them to hunt down those converted Jews, whom they call the Marranos, who secretly continue to follow their old religion.
The converts are the worst. Why? Because deep down, they remain Jews. They pretend to have embraced our faith, but in the secrecy of their homes, they continue with their abominable practices. And it is the duty of the Inquisition to unmask them without mercy and to purify Spain from their poison.
There is another very important consequence of the fall of Granada. It is that finally Isabella and Ferdinand will no longer have to spend on the war. And therefore they could also find the funds to finance a project that their experts have been evaluating for a long time. At least that is what Columbus hopes. But convincing the court that it is a good investment is not easy at all. And on January 16th, for the umpteenth time, Columbus receives an unfavorable opinion.
Oh yes, you know, I was being asked to shell out a lot of money on my part, and immediately, in exchange for a future promise of wealth yet to be proven. It is in the face of a project that, according to experts, had flaws everywhere. It is truly the case to say so.
It is the queen who speaks, not her husband. Because Ferdinand is the king of Aragon, he has the ports of the Mediterranean. But for a journey in the Atlantic, the ports of Castile are needed. It is Isabella who must sign. And all the experts whom Isabella asked to evaluate Columbus's project responded the same thing, that it is madness and that it cannot work. Now here we need to understand each other, because Columbus is always depicted as someone who saw clearly, hindered by a mob of ignorant, superstitious people. Even today, there are those who believe that his problem was to get people to accept the idea that the earth is round. In reality, everyone has known that the earth is round for a long time. The main treatise on astronomy used in medieval universities was titled The Sphere. The problem was the size of the earth, and therefore the duration of the journey across the ocean. And we know that there Columbus cheated. Obviously, he did not think he was going to discover America, even though, so to speak, he hoped to discover new islands and new lands. The ultimate goal was to reach Asia. And he calculated that roughly there were 5,000 kilometers from the Canary Islands, let's say, to Japan. In reality, there are 22,000. He was saved by the fact that he crashed into America less than halfway. But with the data they had, well, the experts who rejected the project were right.
Christopher was devastated by the rejection, furious, and disappointed. But he was not resigned. In fact, he wanted to go to France to see his brother Bartholomew, who was trying to get an audience with King Charles. France, they say, also has ports on the ocean.
Beatriz Enriquez de Araña is the current partner of Christopher Columbus, who is a widower and 15 years older than her. Some time ago they had a son, Ferdinand, but she also raises Columbus's first son, Diego. They are not married and will never marry, probably because Beatriz comes from a family that is too modest. However, she can read and write, which is by no means obvious at the time for a woman of the people.
I was afraid he would really leave, you know. My friends always told me that. But what did you do? You got involved with a sailor and you don't know how it will end. But fortunately, he had many friends at court. He was really good at making them. And they suggested the solution to him: to find private financiers and assure the Queen that she would not have to spend a penny.
At Isabella's side was a financier, Luis de Santangel, one of those whom the Grand Inquisitor kept a close eye on because he was a descendant of converted Jews. He was the first to suggest to the Queen that perhaps under these conditions it might be worth a try. You should not be surprised that it was all a matter of money. Even then, it was very important. Those who had it wanted to make more and were careful about opportunities.
With money you can buy everything. It's not a novelty. I have bought lands, palaces, and mercenary armies. I have donated cities to the popes, jewels to the ladies, and colossal feasts to the people. And very soon indeed I will buy something much better. You will see.
He is Roderick Lansol de Borgia, to use the pronunciation of the time, better known as Rodrigo Borgia, which was also his mother's surname. However, in Spain, it was already quite common at that time to take the maternal surname, and he is Spanish Catalan. Even though he has always lived in Italy, he arrived as a boy to study law in Bologna, and after graduating, he built a career in the church. And there is nothing strange about that. The church was an immense multinational. It did not need people with a vocation. It needed good managers. In reality, Rodrigo's career is not only due to the fact that he was very capable, but also because his uncle was Pope Callistus III, who appointed him cardinal at the age of 25, as was customary at the time. Cardinal Borgia was the papal legate in Spain, and he was the one who organized the marriage between Isabella and Ferdinand, who were first cousins, and in theory should not have been able to marry. He is a brash, excessive man who denies himself nothing. He has had many children with several different lovers, has escaped the plague, and survived a shipwreck. And he is an extremely ambitious man. He has already participated in 4 conclaves, while he was still a bit too young at first. Now, he is truly hoping for it.
There is not a cardinal who, in his heart, does not wish to become the Pope. As for me, I don't want it just for myself. I have a family. I have 4 children still dependent on me. But my favorite is Cesare, and I will make him a prince. Who knows?
Rodrigo Borgia has been said to be everything, and indeed, the name Borgia itself has become synonymous with corruption, vice, poison, sex, and power. However, he was a talented man and will be an important pope. And besides, at his time, Rome is a capital of the world, a capital of world art. These are the years when Michelangelo carves the Pietà. It is true that all of Italy is buzzing with artists, architects, and construction sites. Some of the most representative buildings of our Renaissance are being born. They are working in Pavia at the Certosa. In Ferrara, they are finishing the project of what will be the Palazzo dei Diamanti. However, among many Italian cities, we have chosen to come to the one that is probably the most important of all at that moment, Florence. Florence, which is at the peak of its splendor, is also beginning to feel a subtle melancholy. 2 years ago, for the Carnival of 1490, Lorenzo the Magnificent, who has governed Florence for many years, wrote verses that we all studied in school, perhaps without realizing the subtle anguish that pervades them. How much beautiful youth slips away nonetheless. Whoever wants to be happy, let him be. There is no certainty about tomorrow.
In Florence, one could study and read the books that the Magnificent had brought from Constantinople. I, for my part, have always had a passion for cartography and navigation, and there was certainly no shortage of books on the subject. We would meet at the Neoplatonic Academy of Marsilio Ficino, and there were people with exceptionally refined minds, like Pico della Mirandola, who could recite Dante's Commedia backwards, the whole thing, you know. From the love that moves the sun and the other stars, to the middle of the journey of our life, in reverse, all of it. I don't know if I make myself clear.
This young man to us, is 37 years old. At the time, he was a fully grown man, full of strength. He belongs to a family that lives right around here, near the Church of All Saints in Florence. They are called the Vespucci. A family of businessmen, of bankers, some very rich, others less so. There are relatives who are close to Lorenzo the Magnificent. His branch know his father and grandfather were notaries, and he, Amerigo Vespucci, must earn a living. Therefore, for some years, he has been living in Seville. He works at the Medici Bank branch. However, in Seville, he has discovered that being a bank clerk is not really his calling. He has found something else that he enjoys much more, the sea. Recently, however, what torments him is something else, and that is that the letters from Florence do not bring any good news at all.
The Magnificent was unwell. His son Piero had arrived hastily in the city and had him moved to the villa of Careggi. It was not a good sign at all.
It is God who sends the disease, and thus he forces the great to remember that they too are just dust.
Florence is still always at the forefront, but this time the future it hints at is a little less reassuring. Because here, before elsewhere, the philosophers and artists of the Renaissance are starting to feel fear. Fear of having exaggerated with this matter of pagan gods and man at the center of the universe, as if the Christian God did not exist. Botticelli, to name one, has not painted anything but religious themes for some time now. He who created Primavera and the birth of Venus. Lorenzo the Magnificent is also troubled, and on the advice of Pico della Mirandola, he has brought to Florence from Ferrara this Dominican friar who is shaking half of Italy with his sermons. His name is Girolamo Savonarola.
The earthly world is a mess. Florence is corrupt. The filth of the devil overflows in every street. That Rome and its church are a putrid latrine, overflowing with vice, simony, and other abominable sins that offend the purity of our Lord.
Today it seems like a Taliban delirium. We are no longer equipped to understand this language. But imagine a world where the rich live in unrestrained luxury and respect no rules, while the majority of the people live in poverty and cling to religion as their only solid thing. And then suddenly one arrives, a preacher like Savonarola, who begins to explain to the good people that yes, the world is rotten, that Florence is rotten, and that we should expect the worst, famine, plague, perhaps even the Antichrist, if the rich and their friends, the artists, painters, and musicians, do not change their lives, because God will punish us for all this sooner or later. And the good people who do not concern themselves with art or Greek books can only say, how right he is. Then the opponents, it is clear, mock Savonarola, the prophet of the desperate, but the desperate stand with him. That said, Savonarola is not the only important Dominican friar in our history. There is at least one other, we know, who is moving in that world with quite different things in mind.
Thank you. The Jewish heresy is a malignant tumor. Therefore, it must be eradicated without delay. I have written and published provisions that I hope may inspire the illustrious lords of the rulers of Spain, so that they may put an end to such a great disgrace to our Holy Catholic faith, precisely of our Holy Catholic faith.
In Granada, the Royal Council is convened to discuss the plan for the expulsion of the Jews. This is not the first time that Jews have been expelled from a European country. It has already happened in England and France. But Spain is a special country. During the long centuries of Muslim rule and Muslim tolerance, many Jews settled in Spain. A great Jewish culture has emerged in Spain, and there are Jews integrated at all levels of Spanish society, including Jews and the descendants of those who have converted to Christianity over time. It is precisely these individuals who are now in the crosshairs of Torquemada. And in Spain, there are many important people who have reason to be concerned. Among others, the financier who supports Columbus's project, Luis de Santangel.
The Jews are everywhere. Bankers, courtiers, they think they can advise the kings, but our good sovereigns are the protectors of their people, and the people want the expulsion of the infidels. First, the Moors, and now the Jews. Spain is one, and it is Christian.
Torquemada has made many enemies and his position is no longer unassailable, but the Catholic monarchs still listen to him, for the moment. Perhaps it is precisely this title granted to them by Innocent VIII, Los Reyes, Católicos, that makes their heads spin a bit and convinces them that it is their duty to rule over a completely Christian country. Therefore, on March 31st, they signed the decree of expulsion for the Jews, which is not published immediately because they want it to be announced on the same day throughout Spain, and it takes time to send copies to the more distant provinces. The edict thus remains secret for the moment, but rumors begin to circulate immediately.
We couldn't believe it. It was thought to be false news, and the fact that it had not been made public seemed to prove it. A rumor. Implausible. It must have been just a rumor. Even though the concern was strong,
They had told us of such atrocities committed by the Jews that we could not have acted differently. Do you believe?
We have done what was right. Sovereigns are always in the right, and owe explanations only to God.
Absolutely right. Sacred and holy. And then enough with this story. Didn't you want to know about Columbus? So what now? After Granada, following his insistence, the Queen, my wife, had decided to support him despite the objections of the geographers and all the other experts.
Things fell into place as if by magic. It turned out that I had an outstanding debt with a small town, Palos, which owed me a couple of ships. Someone suggested that I give them to Columbus for his expedition. If I failed, well, I would have lost them. But if by chance I succeeded in my endeavor, I would have been the Catholic queen who conquered the Indies, and God would have witnessed his gratitude towards me.
Only that Columbus had some claims, to say the least, excessive.
Columbus obviously has demands, and they are very specific. He is not a visionary chasing after a fantasy. He is a businessman proposing a huge deal and wants his percentage. And then, since he is a sailor eager to advance his career, he thought of asking for the appointment as admiral.
I have been waiting for a response for 8 years. 8 years. And you are surprised that I had expectations. And anyway, they asked him to renounce the title of Admiral of Castile and to accept in exchange the title of Grand Admiral of the Ocean Sea, which meant nothing at all. However, he accepted, asking in return that his sons, Diego and my Ferdinand, be taken as pages at court. From my point of view, this was worth more than any other promise.
While the expulsion of Jews from Spain is decreed at the court of Spain, and simultaneously the agreements for Columbus's expedition are being finalized, in Italy, Lorenzo the Magnificent is dying. At the age of 43, here, in his villa in Careggi. Lorenzo is dying from gout, or rather, from the aftermath of poorly treated gout. According to legend, the doctor who treated him poorly was thrown into the well of the villa, right here on the other side. There is also a fresco here in the villa that depicts this episode.
he had me called to his bedside, along with Marsilio Ficino, the son Piero, and I prayed for his soul, which was in great need of it.
Lorenzo the Magnificent passed away within a month. What a disaster it was for Florence, but I say for all of Italy, certainly it was a troubling time. The atmosphere was truly grim.
And then I thank divine providence for the opportunity that was being granted to me. Put an end to the Medici, to their paganism, their degenerate artists, their lascivious parties, their half-naked women, their music. To make Christian morality triumph, to revolutionize Florence, and why not the Church of Rome itself? Because the corruption of the Medici had also reached there.
Great is providence. We must certainly and undoubtedly rely on it. And indeed, in that spring of 1492, our Supreme Pontiff also fell ill. Oh yes, poor Pope Innocent VIII, surrounded by fanatics and supposed healers who tried everything on his derelict body. It is even said that they desperately tried to save him with the blood of poor children. The mothers of Rome no longer dared to let them play in the streets. But I cannot believe it is possible. It would be an abominable thing. It is certainly a rumor spread by those who wish harm to the Pope and his church, because it is known how these things go. What say, with your social media? Shitstorm, if I'm not mistaken. A big storm of manure. Indeed, rumors circulate, propagate, and grow, undermining the certainties of the past and preparing for who knows what changes.
And none of them imagined that the fate of Italy, the end of its power and the beginning of a secular decline, was being decided elsewhere in Paris, where another Italian who considered himself very clever and only calculated his own interests, Ludovico the Moor, Lord of Milan, was teasing a young boy who was the King of France by making him glimpse great enterprises.
Poor Charles VIII of the Valois, completely absorbed in planning to invade Italy, while we had an Italian about to gift us the Indies. Or at least that's what he thought.
Indeed, because in the meantime, Columbus and the Catholic monarchs have reached an agreement, and Columbus has obtained almost everything he wanted. He will be admiral of the islands and lands that he will eventually discover. He will be governor of the countries he can find and conquer. In return, he must secure funding for himself. He must find those who will provide the capital. The commercial aspect is by far the most important part of this agreement. Here we are in a world of businessmen, bankers, accustomed to dealing with money, used to drafting very detailed contracts for their trading companies. The agreement between Columbus and the monarchs is effectively a commercial partnership, in which Columbus is authorized to invest his own capital up to 1/8 of the total, and will be entitled to 1/8 of the profits after he discovers something.
Well, there was a lot of talk about what comes next. The fact remained that there was a pile of money to be paid right now. He didn't have it.
Money, however, can be found. You just need to know where to look for it. In this case, Italians, especially those from Florence and Genoa, are very good at it. And indeed, Christopher has turned to Seville to 3 of our businessmen, a bit merchants, a bit bankers. Gianotto Berardi of Florence repaired the Epinello of Genoa, which provided him with that 1/8 that we were to invest, 250,000 maravedi. Thus, in Umbria, a mountain of money.
But that was only 1/8. For the rest, it was necessary to find the financiers. 1 million maravedi, let's say 2 million euros, is provided by Luis de Sant'Angelo, the Queen's financier, who is a nephew of Jews. Another important figure, Martin Alonso Pinzon, a ship owner from Palos, contributes 500,000, and he will later be Columbus's second in command, and also somewhat his rival, during the Great Voyage. At this point, Columbus goes to Palos to inspect the boats that the city is obliged to provide for him by order of the Queen. There are 2 caravels, the Niña and the Pinta, but he wanted 3.
Yes, he wanted 3. That's true. But we had to see what they were like, because you can't just go like that, as if nothing were happening, into the unknown.
Yes, we haven't introduced him yet. His name is Giacomo Rigmo, and he is apparently the only Genoese among the sailors who embarked with Christopher Columbus. He is worried, and he is not entirely wrong. After all, he has embarked, but Columbus has had some difficulty finding all 90 of his men. There weren't many people willing to set sail into the unknown. In fact, Columbus, at one point, worried about not being able to fill his crews, obtained a special privilege from the Catholic monarchs to go into the prisons and ask the inmates if they were willing to enlist in exchange for their release.
Well, there were quite a few rascals, yes. Not me, though. My trouble with the law was a minor issue. There was a misunderstanding over something I borrowed. Anyway, rascal or not, they were all people who knew how to go to sea, that's for sure.
On April 30th, 1492, the Catholic monarchs sign a flurry of edicts confirming all the concessions made to Christopher Columbus. They assured him that if he truly discovers new lands, he will be able to become an admiral and governor, and will be entitled to call himself Don Christopher Columbus. This matter of the Don in Spain was quite important. The day after, on May 1st, the edict expelling the Jews is enacted in all the cities and villages of Spain. It had been signed a month earlier, but the Catholic monarchs wanted it to be communicated at the same moment throughout the country. Therefore, the authorities who had received it needed time to send it to everyone, and it arrived with the order not to open or read it until May 1st. On that day, all the Jews of Spain learned that they had to leave.
That day was terrible. A great sense of pain, a deep terror, an anguish, like that felt by the people of Israel when they were deported to Babylon. We were desperate. We didn't know what to do. Convert, hide, leave, what to bring, what to leave behind, where to go. Someone encouraged us, urging us to keep our faith.
3 months, 3 months of time, and then away, out, everyone. But, of course, they can always convert and be baptized in the true faith. And we will watch and ensure that it is a sincere repentance and a true conversion, because there is nothing worse than a false convert, a Marrano who hides his poison beneath a grimace of submission. For those who have been baptized and then fall back into heresy, there is only one destination: the stake.
In fact, some of the most prominent Spanish Jews, feeling secure in the protection of the sovereigns, will accept conversion to Christianity in order to stay. Even the Grand Rabbi of Castile, Abraham Sr., will be baptized. Besides, he was a great banker, a counselor to the Queen. It suited him. His baptism in the Cathedral of Cordoba would be given great publicity for propaganda reasons. The Queen rushed to be a godparent. The rich get baptized and stay. Everyone else leaves. This Spain of 1492 is a country from which one departs in despair, like hundreds of thousands of Jews? Or with the vague hope of something wonderful? Those 90 unfortunate souls who agreed to set sail with Columbus on a journey into the unknown.
And judging by the condition of the two caravels from Palos, it would have been a very short journey into the unknown. Terrible caulking, 2 leaky boats, and in particular the Pinta, the largest ship, which may have also been a beautiful ship, but it was leaking from all sides.
Columbus was furious, but he told those in Palos about the poor work and the fact that they had not provided him with the third vessel.
The third ship they from Palos do not have, and in any case they do not want to give it. They owed the Queen 2, not 3. However, at that time all governments had the recognized right to confiscate any vessel for the service of the kingdom. And so Columbus is authorized to confiscate a ship. He chooses the one that will become his flagship, the Santa Maria, which belonged to a Basque shipowner who had the misfortune of moving to Palos. His name was Juan de la Co. The Maria no longer exists today, although there are models of it. The Santa Maria ran aground in Hispaniola on Christmas Day in 1492 and was partially weakened to recover the timber. Today we do not even know for sure what it looked like. It was certainly larger than the Nina and the Pinta. Perhaps it wasn't even a caravel. It was a type of vessel of greater tonnage that at the time was technically referred to as a ship. We are not even sure that it was really called the Santa Maria. Columbus always refers to it as the Capitana in his log. What we know instead is that the owner was reimbursed by the sovereigns for the loss of his ship. Those who were not reimbursed at all were the Jews, who were forced to sell everything before leaving.
We could not take gold, silver, weapons, or horses with us. The edict prohibited it. But leaving was costly. Our communities tried to help. The poorest pay for their journey. The lands of the synagogues, hospitals, schools, and baths were sold. There were those who sold their houses in exchange for 2 donkeys, and others who sold their vineyards in exchange for carts. There were also those who arranged for the older children, over 12 years old, to marry each other, so that the girls would not be left alone.
And so we have arrived in July, and while Columbus has completed the recruitment of his crews, the time separating the Jews of Spain from their forced departure is about to end. But in the meantime, the time has also run out for someone else, and a great opportunity opens up for one of the most audacious players we have encountered so far, because Innocent VIII has died, and the conclave is about to begin in Rome.
The nephew of Innocent VIII, Cardinal della Rovere, believes he can make it. He behaves as if he is already the Pope. But those who enter the conclave as Pope leave as a cardinal. You said it again too, right? I acted in time. I alone know how much I have spent, but you will see that I will be the one to come out of the conclave as Pope. If not, I will become a friar.
The cardinals entered the Sistine Chapel on August 6th. There are 23 in total, 21 Italians, 1 Portuguese, and 1 Spanish, Rodrigo Borgia. In Rome, there is an ancient custom whereby, when a cardinal is elected Pope, the people have the right to loot his palace. And before entering the conclave, 7 of the 23 cardinals had their palaces emptied of all furnishings, a sign that they are hopeful. But Rodrigo Borgia did not do it, and neither did his rival, Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere. They are old foxes, and know that the people need to be given some satisfaction. Rodrigo is the most experienced of them all. He has been a cardinal for 36 years. Giuliano has been waiting for 21 years. And now the most important moment of their lives has arrived. But not only for them, because 3 days earlier, the caravel set sail from Palos.
There was a large crowd to greet Christopher Columbus and his crew. Some were gesturing joyfully, but many were also held back. And there were many family members of the sailors as well. And inside them, there was a strong unease that it should be a one-way trip. And I felt it too.
We had loaded provisions for 15 months and water for 6. This is already a problem. No, because Admiral Columbus had said it would be a journey of at most 2 months. It was already puzzling, you know, because let's say with those ships, it would have already been something of a miracle to last 2 months.
To infinity and beyond. What an incredible journey Columbus had begun to cross half the planet and arrive in Asia, and he was certain of it, indeed. He had embarked a notary to record his discoveries, of a translator, a Jew, yes, obviously converted, who also spoke Arabic and perhaps Chinese.
The curses, however, were in Basque, Catalan, and Portuguese, and then there were mine in Sienese, because we struggled to reach the Canary Islands. There was the Pinta, in particular, that was unmanageable. Its rudder was stuck, and the holds kept taking on water. There was Columbus, who was fuming ever since he got angry.
And while Columbus realizes that the boats he set out with are not exactly top quality, in Rome, the conclave has ended. On August 11th, in the 4th ballot, Cardinal Borgia was elected.
Yes, I know. I understand the attention on Columbus's journey. We are living in a great era. But if you allow me, my election as Pope is not exactly a trivial matter. I, Rodrigo Borgia, have become Pope Alexander VI. And my beloved children, Caesar and Lucretia, are the children of the Pope. And I will make them lords of Italy. As for Cardinal della Rovere, he is so upset that he wants to embark as well, to travel in order to forget. Let him go, let him go.
Cardinal della Rovere, Julian, will really leave. He will go to the court of France, and you know, the threads of our story are all intertwined. He will return to Italy in 2 years with Charles VIII and his canons, and in 9 years he will also become Pope, Julius II. But we are still in that August of 1492, when the people of Rome, celebrating, invade the palace of Cardinal Borgia, and his bankers begin to tally the enormous sums they will have to pay due to the bribes he promised to the other cardinals in exchange for their votes. And Columbus is stuck in the Canary Islands because the ships he was given are junk and are in constant need of repairs, while many other ships set sail from Spain, loaded with Jews, in a new diaspora.
We set out, leaving our homes, our lands, men, women, the old, children. We crowded the ports with great ships, overflowing with pale and weeping spectres. But by nature, man is also able to overcome the greatest pains and begins to hope again. We on board tried not to talk about Spain. We tried to imagine those countries that had promised us hospitality, Morocco and Turkey. And we hoped that there we would truly rebuild our lives, and indeed that is how it was. We must thank the Muslims, yes, even though, for centuries, in their countries, we continue to speak Spanish.
Yes. Here's another annoyance. What could have come to the minds of my beloved sovereigns, the Catholic kings, to expel so many subjects from their realms, all wealthy people, and to gift them to the Sultan? Oh yes, because that guy, the Sultan, he's not stupid at all. He's welcoming them with open arms. And for me, who am the Pope, the Lord of the world, all the troubles come to me. Complaints, denunciations, accusations, all correspondence from Spain. Everyone is complaining about how that old fool Litor Camada is handling the matter. This decision to leave the kings of Spain the right to appoint the Grand Inquisitor, instead of managing it ourselves from Rome, has been a great mistake.
I have shown everyone that there is a final solution to defend the purity of our blood. And my nation will be eternally grateful to me. For now, it will be possible to forge a new man, purified from all ugliness, free from original sin. And so, I will be able to render the soul to our Lord in peace.
There is still a character in this story that I need to introduce to you. His name is Guababo. He is an Indian from the Taino people who lives in the Caribbean. He knows nothing yet of Europe, of the ships of Christopher Columbus sailing towards his island, of those other ships taking the Jews away from Spain, of the delusions about blood purity that will one day become those of race. He knows nothing about it, but soon he will know too much, because there are only a few weeks left until the discovery of America.
The Indies, you understand, Dear Columbus was convinced of this idea for quite a while. It took a lot to convince him that the land he had reached was not Asia, but a new world. Oh, if he had been a little less stubborn, they probably wouldn't have named America after me, but after him, Cristofora. Anyway, what a journey it must have been.
Oh yes, what a journey it has been. A journey of, well, let's not get into that. I'll just say that after 2 months, we were still in the middle of the ocean, stuck in those filthy, stinking seaweeds. What are they called? Ah, the sargasso. A light breeze was pulling at him, and it was scorching hot. Things were not going well at all, and the crew was at their wits' end. And then that wheat of Columbus continued to provide distances traveled that were much shorter than those actually covered, because he was afraid that the crew would turn against him, as there was a risk that the supplies and water would not be enough to return in the heat. And then the wind picked up, and we resumed our journey. And so we saw the first sea swallows in the sky, and the ducks that don't fly too far from the land.
And the sea was green, but not with algae, with grass. We gathered the first branches with the berries still attached, to catch the first sea bream, and then at a certain point, from the pint, a sailor, Rodrigo, started to shout, "Land! Land!" And then there was a huge commotion. We started shouting and drank everything there was to drink. What a hangover. What a moment it was.
He did it. My Christopher, Admiral Christopher Columbus did it. Now our life is that of our son. It changed forever.
It is October 12th, 1492, and Columbus steps ashore. It is the scene we have seen reproduced countless times. Columbus kneeling, swords drawn, banners flying, a cross planted on the beach, perhaps by a friar. In fact, there were no friars in Christopher Columbus's crew, so what really happened? In his report, he states that he went ashore and made the proclamation. That is, he proclaimed loudly, in Spanish, that he was taking possession of that island in the name of the kings of Spain, and planted their flags, which was a claim of sovereignty. And he said, since no one opposed him, now this island is ours, and I have named it Salvador in memory of our Savior, Jesus Christ. That island is in the Bahamas and is still called San Salvador today. Columbus states that it was full of inhabitants, and it does not seem to have crossed his mind that they might also have some rights to their land. This is a tendency that Westerners struggle to overcome. However, he was convinced that he had arrived in Asia, in the Indies, as they said, somewhere near Marco Polo's Cathay, or perhaps Chipango. Japan. The physical appearance of the inhabitants does not change his mind. After all, they were not used to seeing Japanese people.
Sumaganjakit bayağı yokuk.
And they came to meet us like that, naked, as their mother made them. And they were beautiful. Big eyes, beautiful features. The women were attractive. And we didn't understand a thing of what they were saying.
Paitauna, hinan, haburanku.
Columbus pretended to understand everything. He talked to us about the Great Khan and told us that he had been informed about gold, about the great gold deposits. The truth is that neither he nor the translator understood a thing.
Gold is the other obsession. You know, the Indies were the homeland of spices. And at that time, the spice trade guaranteed enormous profits. Therefore, in the minds of Europeans, the Indies meant immense wealth. And wealth meant gold. For the people, India had to be a country full of gold. And Columbus somewhat believes it too, and somewhat knows that they are expecting him back home. When he returns, they will ask him, "Did you find the gold?" And he will not be able to say no.
He returned, claiming to have found gold in such quantities that within less than 3 years, we would embark on the conquest of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem.
Yes, but it was clear that he was improvising. However, he was right about one thing. It was necessary to immediately appeal to the Pope to have our ownership of this new route to the Indies recognized, because only in this way could we beat the competition from the Portuguese, who were trying to reach it by going around Africa.
When it became known that Columbus had indeed reached the Indies and opened a new route, claiming islands and islets in the name of the kings of Spain, the other great power bordering the Atlantic, Portugal, became agitated. Among other things, Columbus returned to Lisbon, so the Portuguese were the first to be informed. And King John of Portugal has papal bulls that authorize him to take possession of all new lands that will be discovered, south of the Canary Islands. In the 1400s, the Portuguese were engaged in exploring Africa, and those papal bulls referred to Africa. But according to the King of Portugal, they could also apply to the new lands discovered by Christopher Columbus. The result is that Isabella and Ferdinand decide to turn to the Pope, who is Spanish, to declare that all those new lands instead belong to Spain.
It has been another lovely nuisance, for goodness sake, a gift from God, and a wonderful opportunity for evangelization. And in words, the Catholic monarchs declared that I was the Lord of the world, and that I could divide it as I pleased. A great, beautiful thing, but in practice I had to do what they wanted. It was about taking the world map and drawing a line in the ocean, and declaring that everything beyond that line belonged to them. They also made me understand that a Spanish pope,
he does not have many friends in the world, and it is better for him to keep on good terms with the kings of Spain.
In the end, the Spaniards and the Portuguese will come to an agreement. The Pope really draws the line in the middle of the ocean. Then the Portuguese manage to have it moved a little further west. And this is why, when they discover Brazil, with its hump extending towards Africa, it will touch the Portuguese. It's no coincidence that Portuguese is still spoken in Brazil today. The Spaniards take everything else on this continent that they continue to call the Indies for lack of a better term. It will take some time to acknowledge that this is actually a new world.
Here, another world, a new world, a great landmass that is not the Indies, but another continent.
And since I noticed it among the first, why shouldn't I try to have my name given to it?
It's a matter of knowing how to sell oneself. And we Florentines, as you know how to do it.
Vespucci is the first to realize that the new lands discovered by Columbus do not resemble the Indies or Japan at all. They are indeed a whole new world. He will also be very good, he said, at selling this intuition of his. The letters in which Vespucci recounts his travels are published throughout Europe, translated into all languages. And almost immediately, cartographers and geographers decide that this new continent, this fourth continent, deserves to be named after Amerigo, America. If we want one of the great injustices of history, but in this way we have gone too far forward in time by 10 years, 15 years, and instead we want to stay in 1492, which is now coming to an end, with Columbus preparing to depart with the 2 caravels that remain after the Santa Maria ran aground. The only problem is that there is not enough room for all the sailors.
And I am one of those who had to stay there, and you know how it ended. The Pinta set sail again due to a lack of provisions, and the Santa Maria was lost because of a deficient cabin boy who was given the helm. Then Columbus had us disembark from the Spanish ship to build a small fort with the remains of the vessel. There were 39 of us, half of those who had set out. And then when he left with the Nina, he told us, "I give you a year to gather a ton of gold and spices, and then I will come to get you." At that moment, we were also pleased. But then when we saw the sails disappearing on the horizon, well, we looked at each other, and there weren't many happy faces.
Columbus then kept his promise. The following year, he returned to Hispaniola, which means Little Spain and is the island where today there are Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He returned with an entire fleet. This time he was the admiral, and he found no one. They were all dead, including Giacomo Rimo. The local inhabitants claimed that other very hostile indigenous people had arrived, and that they had destroyed the fort. In reality, it seems that the Spaniards, in their search for gold deposits, have, so to speak, gotten a bit carried away, and in the end, the people took justice into their own hands. On the other hand, what are 39 dead when you are building an empire? At the end of 1492, with Columbus still on his journey, no one in Spain imagined that soon the country would become the greatest power in the West. Just as in Italy, no one imagined that within 2 years the French, and then the Spaniards, would reduce the peninsula to a land of conquest. Or maybe not. Perhaps there was someone who could imagine it.
A new leader will soon come. A new Cyrus, who will cross the Alps. And Italy should not hope to protect itself with its castles and fortresses, for he will take them, as one picks fruit from the branches. Florence will be reformed under my guidance. And you will see. We will make a nice bonfire of every vanity, while Rome will be turned upside down, and money, soldiers, and castles will be of no use, for only penance will bring salvation.
Let him prophesy, Savonarola. Let him speak. It is not him that the church should fear. Other. Clouds are gathering on its horizon.
The world was truly changing. A new generation of European humanists was emerging. Christians no longer enamored with paganism, like certain old Florentine humanists, but still somewhat unwilling to accept the rules of the church. Erasmus of Rotterdam, for example, is 25 years old in 1492. He has just entered a convent of friars, but he will not stay there long. And in a small town in Saxony, there is a 9-year-old boy who goes to school. And since he is good at it, he will be sent to university. And one day he will be Dr. Martin Luther, and he too will change the world. Even if we say it, the world is constantly changing. There has never been a time when it remains still. But at least for our protagonists, 1492 is truly the year that changed their lives forever, for better or for worse. 1492 is truly the year that changed their lives forever, for better or for worse.
1492 indeed. Changed their lives forever. 1492 is the year that changed their lives forever. 1492 is the year that changed their lives forever. It is crucial to understand and accept that mortality is an unavoidable aspect of the human condition. Every person, no matter their social standing, wealth, or accomplishments, will ultimately encounter the end of their life. This undeniable fact serves as a profound reminder to approach each day with a sense of purpose and deliberate intention. By acknowledging the finite nature of our existence, we are encouraged to cherish and make the most of the moments we are given. This perspective can inspire us to live more fully, appreciating the beauty and fragility of life. Action.
On Rodrigo Borgia, 2 first.
I say it, Beatrice second, first.
Are we waiting for the storm?
No! They were gathering! And what did I say?
Great prop. Esore. No.
Don't say anything or I'll forget everything.
Can I do something like sponge my feet as filthy as that?
To infinity and beyond. The face always there.
Sorry.
To infinity and beyond.
Sorry, I need to review it.